Hello, you brilliant soul, and welcome back to the Josh Campbell channel, where I help you healthy up your relationships and escape toxic red flags and patterns. Now, today is one not to miss because we're going to explore the Masks of Masculinity and how you can get under men's insecurities and connect with your man again. We're going to explore why men wear masks, personas, and why that's an issue for you and why you find that so painful. We're going to see what those masks are and then how you can give your relationship a chance again, or get to more ultimatums, whether it's time to go and this is just totally incompatible and he's too avoidant for you, to your anxious potential tendencies. So let's rock and roll into this. I'm going to use some of my stories, get vulnerable on this one, because me being a man, I'd like to hope so, although I'm slightly a feminine soul, this is going to come from a very honest, vulnerable, and hopefully integral approach. So let's rock and roll without further ado. So let's give you a quick 101 on Jungian psychology, because it's a huge theory that we can use why men wear masks. So Carl Jung in the day, who was a world-renowned German psychologist of the time, came up with the idea that we had a real self in the middle at our core. It's that authentic self. It's all those, positive gurus tell you. It's that little thing, that little soul, that's God's essence, as I would like to say, your spirit that's in there and exists within you. Somewhere along the line with conditioning or performance or feeling scared or shame about your true nature, we started to create an ego, which is the performative side of our sense of self. Our self is a big circle, imagine, and this is the top space that's being seen by society, by people. It's what everybody essentially sees. So we have an ego which basically differentiates what's safe to be seen, and in so doing, we manifest a mask, a persona for everybody to see. What happens here though is that we create a big disparity if this is a false version of who we truly are. What happens is underneath the true self, under here, we have a shadow self. This is stuff we've shamed about ourselves, stuff that we've buried deep because society, family, parents, friends had said it's so not okay for you to show that certain behavior trait because it doesn't make us feel safe, makes us feel insecure. And so you've probably been bullied, picked on, or thrown, in the back room because of a certain behavior, and so you don't show it again. Why? Because it's unsafe to do so. You as a young boy and even as an adult are here with a mission to gain love, to be accepted, to fit in. And what happens there? We become comparing, inauthentic, self-doubting, self-critical manifestations, don't we? And this is what happens with men. We become so ashamed of some of our traits, so we build an even stronger mask, and this just perpetuates into our adulthood. Now let's explore a little reason why we do this. Number one is that we have a fear-based identity. Yes, this is our vehicle of performance, this vehicle that helps us run away from something that scared us, whether we fight, flight, or freeze. Fight being something we approach and probably wear an aggressive version of ourselves. Flight meaning we run away, we become a Peter Pan man, we don't take responsibilities, we don't suffer some form of consequences, and we run away from who that true version of ourselves is. And then we freeze, it's more paralysis. It's what I probably adopted as a boy, we'll explain further, where you just go into self-doubt, you can't make decisions, you kind of shame yourself to the point of victimization and just take life as it is. Life is kind of out of your control in that state. And so of course in this performance, we don't really fully embrace the human experience, and that goes for emotions too. So we react to anger, sadness, or fear as the three core primary emotions which create the roles of rescuer, victim, and aggressor or persecutor. We tend to wear masks that fortify this identity, which becomes a fear-based, drama-based identity. Of course, this is obviously going to make unsettling ripple effects in your relationship happen and also be a block to the intimacy that you want to have. You are probably not able to have those deep conversations because he's scared to do so and likely using a distractive persona to run away from the true issues that you want to feel. In my research, Eli Finkel said we are happiest when we perceive our actual self and our authentic selves with warmth and acceptance. So your partner sees that person, affirms it, encourages it, just like the Michelangelo effect, where we see a sculpture, we want to carve out that best version. We already see beauty, and it's just having that encouragement to get out the comfort zone or be that safe haven to come back to. Men also need this more than ever. Contrary to popular belief, men also are type 2s on the Enneagram, which are helpers. They're more empathic, more sensitive than you may think. So we need to see our partner with an unconditional positive regard, as Carl Rogers would say, so we can override that shame and start to come into those true conversations and really see if we can contribute, influence our partner to really come out of their shells. And the reason number 2 for why we create ideal persona version of ourselves and we don't really want to be seen as that real version is the influence of our parents. You heard it. Yes, parents, when we grow up as boys, as little sponges, we're seeing as examples, as role models. If we see our mum, dad, aggressive or angry or outbursting or alcoholic or creating chaos in the household, we want to escape. We see as anger as danger. We see fear as an appropriate response. We fight, flight, and freeze because it's instinctual. It's just like seeing a saber-toothed tiger in your living room. It's like, fuck, we've got to get into a cave, run away because it's safer there. This is exactly what happened to me as a young boy. Although I didn't grow up in a massively chaotic household, I did have secure parents, that at times my dad was quite preoccupied with work, my mum quite permissive, and so I was likely not seen and likely not truly able to express my little authentic performative actor boy because I thought I was weird. Potentially I heard some comments about my authentic self being weird, so I would shut down, I would stonewall, I would internalize, I would start to say there's something wrong with me, and what happened was I spent 8 hours a day in the back room playing video games, not socializing with my family at dinner times, and again assimilating with my family. I probably associated as a sensitive boy this world and this environment as too scary, too unsafe, so I locked away. And this is where our societal norms become extremely damaging, because that shadow gets even stronger when we don't see those shameful emotions. We are not okay showing anxiety, we're not okay showing sadness, we're not okay being a wimp. We're instead told to man up by dad as well. We have that dialogue being projected to us. Luckily I didn't. But in that space, we tend to isolate, we tend to problem solve, and we try to fix it without seeking support. We become avoidant to letting good in, and we tend to be compliant to aggressors or people who don't respect boundaries or manipulate you, and start to become agreeable to that. It depends who you are. Most men can actually become more familiar to what they once learned as their dad. They probably were unable to be seen, so they approach that response and become angry, explosive, aggressive, which you probably may have seen before, or they run away, just like the flight response. They want to find new, they want to find a difference, they want to explore something that they once didn't see in childhood. It was so painful, and they're a martyr to their own life. And this is a beautiful example of somebody trying to disrupt parental patterns and make a change. And if you're a guy out there listening to this video too, well done you for really going into that inner work, because it's so necessary to help us really tackle this generational pattern that's become so toxic and normal. And so that leads me to number 3. There's a lot of shame around not being a man, and that will neglect the vulnerability, that will neglect emotions, that will neglect self-care, self-nurturance, and instead promote machoism. What does machoism mean? Aggression. What does machoism mean? Alpha maleism. What does machoism mean? It means dominance, competition. It's almost like pain is a fuel source for aggression. It's actually almost gifted. It's like, yeah, let's create more pain in our lives, let's create more suffering, let's really live out this identity and externalize all the anger we can, because we actually get promoted for being macho. And this leads me on to number 4. Men and women are from different planets. Yes, I mean from the 1800s, where Aristotle believed that men were from the city or sphere of polis, which was all about away days. This was all about work. This was all about politics. And women were all about oikos, which was named after home, the nurturance, the domesticated. And this lived with us all the way through into the 1950s, which isn't long, believe it or not, 70 years ago, that women were just the pure, piety, submissive types, whereas men were the aggressive, assertive, go-getters, providers, all the way up until 1950s. And believe it or not, it only took 1980 for the Moral Penal Code to be passed, which stopped men having sex without consent with women. So women didn't really start to get rights, and that feminine movement didn't really start to come through until the 1980s. So men have only just started to try and disrupt patterns, start to become more equal, started to really realize that we are from the same planet and we have a lot of similarities. Of course, it's nice to have roles in a household. It's nice to be responsible for certain things in life. Of course, I am a firm believer that there needs to be masculine and feminine energy in a heterosexual or a homosexual relationship to create intimacy and fire. And for living aligned to our dharmas, our rights, our natural gifts and talents, and if we're born with more feminine natures or born with more masculine natures, live aligned to that. That is the code you were given by God, by spirit, whatever you want to believe in, to fulfill your prophecy. And so there are men that exist today that do shame other men for not being a woman. To man up. Stop being a pussy. Stop talking about emotions, because that's not where we're from. So likely it's a projection from men who are living in an outdated society and an outdated mindset and an outdated map, and projecting upon sensitive men that likely want to show their emotions but are probably just trying to fit in. And of course, in that fitting in, we lose that authentic self and we start to glorify our persona and strengthen that mask. So you could be with a sensitive soul, you could be with a lovely, emotionally available man, but unfortunately, he's been so conditioned by the masculine norm to just man up, get on with it, and doesn't truly know that he needs to express his more feminine and woman-orientated side. And now reason number 5, we're getting there, is governance. Yes, government, order, laws, rules have made this real taboo around aggression, creating lots of suppression around toxic masculinity. Look at this example. I heard Jordan Peterson talk about how men are locked away for their aggression. The vast majority of those in prison are male, based on violence, based on muggings, based on burglary, whereas women are a harder subset to set boundaries around, to set laws around. Take the Amber Heard Johnny Depp situation. Defamation cases are extremely hard to win, and well done him and his law team, but they found out there's malevolence behind women's words, behind women's ability to defame, to destroy reputation. In a wounded feminine way, we destroy reputation. In a wounded masculine, we start to be an aggressor. And then finally, of course, all of this conditioning from an external source is going to create internal impact, and that only creates dysregulation on our central nervous system and creates a very reactive man. This turns into guilty behavior, and this is what we're finally going to get into. So now you know why men tend to run away, feel obviously scared, and tend to feel very unequipped or unknowing of how to become their true authentic selves. Of course, trauma work, inner child healing would be absolutely beneficial, but not everybody has the same capacity or same self-worth or same self-drive to do so. So hopefully this video will help now. We need to now know what men transform into in their fake version. I've used Lewis Howes's 9 Masks of Masculinity with my own inferences, so let's lock and load. Number 1 is the Stoic mask. You've heard about Stoicism over a long period of time. This is a very outdated masculine mindset. It's all about conscientiousness. It's all about numbing up, moving on. It's all about being decisive. It's all about let's forget about the past and move on. When actually, if you're trauma informed, you know that trauma has a profound effect on neurochemical biology and also on your automatic nervous system. When you're seeing external stimuli coming into your world that actually replicated something that was deeply traumatic in the past, you tend to take a very fight, flight, freeze response and become debilitated. Sometimes trauma is complex. It's not obvious where it's come from, and sometimes it just runs up in our lives in very minute symptoms that we tend to bypass. Things like perfectionism, indecisiveness, self-doubt, comparisonitis, many more. This is a form of actual trauma that can be quite complex, whether it's an inner child wound or a comment from a teacher, parent, work, or colleague. We tend to own those projections about ourselves that are probably insecurities of theirs, and we add it like a badge to our new identity. This only fortifies a toxic shadow that we're likely unseeing and not bringing more compassion, vulnerability, and wholeheartedness around. And so sadly, with the Stoic mask, we tend to be problem solvers, fixers, completely bypass the emotional aspect and see logic as better than emotion. This is extremely frustrating, I can imagine, with connecting with a man who is failing to see that emotions are the fundamental root to the issues at hand, and probably the fundamental root to why they're wearing the Stoic mask. Number 2, we have the athlete mask. This is all about achievements, climbing the hierarchy of survival of the fittest and being the most prowess, strongest, and of course, talented out of the crew around them. This was a little bit like me. This is where you find your worth in achievements. This is my type 3 and my Enneagram really showing through now. This can be a distractive habit and also a mask for high functioning anxiety. This is a place where we tend to expend unspent energy. We tend to ruminate, we tend to distract, and we tend to get enmeshed with this athlete mask, and we get obsessed with health protocols, training, exercise. That was also me when I played football. I also worked out beyond belief. It was a way of me coping through my mental health, when the reality was I could have done some breathwork meditation, probably done some other journaling modalities instead of vent all my aggression into exercise. Now, this is not to shame a man's innate ability to need to express his anger. So exercise is a beautiful way to move energy, but I think sometimes the athlete mask, if in a unhealthy, wounded way, is a way to achieve, to compete, to be the best, and sometimes that can be devastating to your relationship. Number 3, we have the material mask. This is based on scarcity. This is all about when I get something material, I will be worthy of love. My outward representation of my material, financial, status-orientated success makes me then worthy because I will then be seen. We also learned in my past video with the Tinder swindler that this is a very seductive trait, to realize that we can create fantasies for women to fulfill a need for status, a need for resources, and access to those resources through showing that we are able to provide. And I'm afraid the material mask lives very strongly with men because that's a role we've needed to fulfill for centuries. And number 4, we have the sexual mask. Yes, with the growing idea of porn and performance, men are led to believe that their worth derives from their sexual ability. I did another video on this here to create more sexual security for your man, but men tend to want to feel safe, to feel accepted, to of course create new zones of confidence and competence around other areas that do not require the bedroom. Men with the sexual mask learn that there are probably no consequences. They probably haven't hit nature's boundaries of STDs, STIs, and have likely lived this as a fantasical addiction. Again, another way men can escape through addiction. Sex kicks off dopamine, kicks off lots of very neurologically dense experiences. And now sex and porn and 50 Shades of Grey has become pop culture. Men start to see that they can become seductive in a sexual manner. So in a very self-centered way, men know that sex is a way to get what they want in a dopamine-centric way, and also be something where they can create desires for you that you've not yet experienced, and tend to be a net to catch you in. Then we have the aggressive mask. This is a fight response. This is about creating avoidance and distance to don't get too close. It's about showing that I'm intimidating so you keep your distance. It's the bully, it's the abuser, it's the intimidation that keeps you at a distance and never wants to get too close. This is probably a very difficult mask to deal with, and I think this is a huge place to set boundaries around consequences on and get out and deserve better. We then have the Joker mask. Yeah, that was a form of me too. The jackass, the class clown, the one that wants to please everybody and be the performer. This tends to be a great way to distract attention onto something new. Humor can actually be self-directed. It can be used as satire to areas of things that have insecurities embedded in, and tend to then dissolve those subjects as ammunition to be used against them. Very kind of complex, but the idea is to make fun of things that make them feel insecure. So not only does it shift attention away from painful emotions, it also has a manifestation of those painful emotions. It can get quite complex, but just like me, I used humor in the Joker mask as a way to desensitized subjects that were sensitive to me. Here's a photo of me showing a satsuma next to my penis and sort of showing how long it is. Yes, for me as a young, sensitive teenage boy going through puberty, dick size was a fucking conversation. I don't think I was the biggest hanging horse in the class, but there we go. There's me having a laugh, trying to distract that, okay, this could, distract from humor, and then I won't be targeted or bullied for such things. Quite complex, but it's a very popular mask many men wear. Then we have the Invincible Mask. This is the man that has no limits, the man that probably has no remorse, has no idea of consequences, takes on far too much than he can bear. This is the guy that's seen the superheroes as a boy and thought, just like Superman, he has no crux, he is invincible. He can take on the world's greatest enemies and problems. And what happens? We are very mortal beings and we are very emotional beings, so this does create a very impulsive, unemotional, and I'm okay mentality. And just like tribal mentality, men will go out to war without thinking of the emotional consequences that they're needing to chop off heads or kill deer for the family. They're just gonna do without thinking. Then we have the know-it-all mask. I hope this video hasn't shown that that's me as well. God, I've had 3 so far. But this is all about men who find their security, their confidence in intellect. It's people who probably didn't see that they could compete in the physical aspect or the Joker aspect or the superhero aspect. They're like, well, I'm going to be that nerd in science class because that's how I gain resources, gain attention, gain validation, gain love. I am worthy in that role. There's a universal law that knowledge is power and it's a beautiful thing to weaponize. Maybe they weren't heard as a child and this is a great way to get attention and actually speak from a place of power. And then we have the alpha mask. Just like a pack of wolves, it's the wolf that's seen to be the most competent, the one that's able to cope with devastation, is able to cope with burden and okay to lead the pack in desperate times. In a human sense, this is about somebody who is cutting out weakness, is being very assertive, decisive, and being the survivor, the one that's the toughest, the one that does its best to tyrannically cut out competition for its own sense of status. And in this dysfunctional mask, we can tend to see vulnerability as weakness. It's all about moving the pack forward. It's all about providing once more. It's all about not getting fluffy with feelings or philosophy and actually just seeing what's tangible, logical, and getting the next step forward. And the alpha mask is probably the one that all men want. There's YouTube channels called The Alpha Man. There's The Alpha Leet. I've got bloody clothes for the gym that say Alpha Leet. Men really want to manifest this identity because it is the top dog. It's the one that secures resources and it's the one that has the most status embedded in it. Be careful of these though, because they're very non-remorseful. They're at all costs. They have no limits at times and probably don't have much emotions and tend to always want to knock their competition down. And then we have the spiritual mask. Yes, this one is used a lot. It's pop culture, isn't it? I think spirituality is the new cool these days. It's the guy that will probably put in his Tinder bio that he meditates 10 hours a day and is going to give you all your sexual desires. It's pretty cool, isn't it? It's a place that you can live without boundaries and no consequences. It's a fluffy, philosophical place to live in. It can bypass reality, escape into fantasy, and it's enticing and mysterious to the everyday person. And the spiritual mask can also be weaponized as the vehicle to our spiritual awakening, our spiritual healing, and the way that we see a healing fantasy. It's one that where he can solve my problems. Be the wise old guy which we can learn from. He can heal us. For once we can be cared for. And if you've got the mother wound or the father wound where you were neglected as a child and not fully appreciated or seen or taught what boundaries and consequences were, or given the validation and acceptance for who you truly were, that man may have all the answers for you and could be, again, a big net and trap. And now you're familiar with all those masks. I was the Joker, the athlete, and the tough one at times. I could be quite a few of those masks, and again, it's not to say that we're one or the other, it can be a blend of all of them. But I would say, ultimately, it's a protection mechanism. It's a running away from femininity and avoiding emotions. It's a great way to be the vehicle to get what we want in resources. And this is what we need to come to and reframe the whole experiences. Men do this too, even if they're in their 20s, 30s, 40s. They may just be doing the best they can with the tools that they have at hand. They may not be aware that this mask is playing out. So this is where our dialogue, our conversation can get to the truth and give you the red or green flags, whether to continue with your commitment or try and divulge and dig deep for the layers and try to connect and see that authentic person underneath and see the relationship, just as Carl Rogers said, with a positive sentiment override and positive regard. Here we go. Now, let's give you some tips on how to uncover the mask and get underneath those layers and improve your relationship with men. Number one, I'd say know your role. This is the most empowered place to come from. It's not about externalizing, blaming him for our reactions or our status in a relationship or our quality of relationship. It's about seeing how you show up so you can bring out the best in him. So, first of all, I would say your sexual energy. Look at that. Polarity exists, just like the I Ching and the yin and yang. That happens with masculine and feminine energies. Of course, we need to find an equilibrium and balance. Now, identify where you're imbalanced, whether you have too much masculine or feminine energy, or he does, whether you're out of tilt. And just to show you some characteristics of what those energies are, masculine is all about being, in a healthy way, is all about being decisive, assertive, goal-orientated, and providing, strong in a good way, courageous, brave, all of those lovely things. Women are all about kindness, purity, piety, compassion, nurturance, creativity, love, acceptance. All of these lovely words are the feminine side. In the wounded side, we've got masculine with cold, relentless, no limits, no boundaries, aggression, anger, explosion, seduction, controlling, dominant, and you can imagine your mind keep going on that one. With women, we've got the mean girl syndrome. This is all about gossip. This is all about being super hypersensitive. This is all about seduction. This is all about defaming reputation. And so in that wounded way, do you see your wounded feminine showing up? Because if you're coming from this defaming, de-reputation space, men are likely going to be coming to you with a persona because them being rejected as their true authentic self is deeply painful and again, an attack on their reputation. What did we see with reputation in a mask and wounded unconscious manner is that all these masks have the motivation to get more resources, to be seen by the world in a new way. So your defaming of his mask or his nature can be very deeply damaging and only strengthen the mask that he projects in the relationship. So what I would suggest is not see internal and perpetual flaws of his. Make them temporary and external circumstances to why he is the way he is. Let me say that again. Try not to make it personal to him. Try and find reasons in his story in the external realm that's made him be like he is today. This will help you come to the relationship with a more positive stance. Understand your incompatibilities, your differences, and see how his differences are more magnetic to you and help you grow and expand rather than keep you stuck, imprisoned, and unable to climb Mount Maslow's hierarchy of needs in our relationship. Unlike the Michelangelo effect we spoke about earlier, we need to encourage, praise, and acknowledge what the man is doing. Men love to provide. Give him the opportunity to do so. So for example, if you want a date night, say, I love your choice of restaurants when you take me out. Can we do it again? Something like that. It's not attacking, it's opening up an invitation for him to fulfill for you. And of course, when he does the positive behaviors, acknowledge it. Get really clear on what things he's been doing right in your relationship and start to acknowledge that and what you want more of. And if you want to get clear on your values and more authentic self, then do please go through my free mini course in the description below. Number 2, explore the inner child. Me and Jazzy sat down the other day and really explored mine. What was a brilliant affirmation of this was that Jazz said, don't bypass your parents. Look at this objectively. As much as you loved your parents and didn't want to see fault in them, or that there was painful experiences you want to keep running away from, look back into the past. We can only heal if we really look back at the past objectively and write about it clearly and concisely and very emotionally, really unpack that emotional processes, the triggers, the reactions, what happened in front of you, really journal in on those things. But I would suggest asking your man, what was the most predominant negative emotion you felt as a child? From there, explore. Why did he feel a certain way? What happened? How did it happen? Ask him what his relationship was like with his mum and dad. And what we want to find out is if his dad was more authoritarian, if he was more aggressive, if he was more permissive, or if he was a bit neglectful, a bit preoccupied. These are the three, I'd say, negative aspects of parenting that can really show up. We want to find a parent that's both responsive and demanding upon us, so really look at that authoritative evidence. If mum or dad was not authoritative and was the three other traits I just mentioned, then there's likely some symptoms showing up now. And number three, create as much security as you can. In relationships, it's broken down into anxious attachment, avoidant attachment, and fearful avoidant attachment, which is all about a combination of the two, but we can create a red zone in either or of these dynamics. Mostly and stereotypically, women become the anxious, the one that needs closeness, and you're likely watching this video in that space. I actually work with clients who have a combination where they get close, and then that fear of losing that closeness or fear of losing that person they've become attached to, they then become more avoidant, they become more distant, they bounce back like an elastic band. And then finally we have the avoidant, which tends to stonewall, becomes probably quite self-centered and creates distance and tries to maintain sense of independence. So this is a trap in all senses and forms that comes around in our relationships. You have then the secure partner, which is why we want to create the security, because we can both come into a relationship as one and come to it in a very stable manner and not take things personally. If somebody needs independence, we don't take it as a trigger or an activation state or a deactivation state. We tend to come in together and understand each other's needs. Again, communication of your needs really helps here. If you're more on the anxious spectrum or the avoidant spectrum, you can find out in the quiz below in my description or online, just type in what is my anxious or avoidant attachment style. You can figure out what your needs are and tend to express those to your partner. So we see very commonly in men the victim and Viking responses. The victim is like the Peter Pan, the one that tends to act out sadness, tends to want you to nurture and mother him, and has probably had an absent mother in childhood. And we have the Viking, the aggressive one, the alpha, the superhero, the invincible, the know-it-all. Those masks really live in that space. And I watched a beautiful documentary the other day called The Octopus Teacher, where a man fell in love with an octopus. What was interesting is that when he came down and dived down, he couldn't encroach on the octopus's den too deeply. He, over the course of a few days and hundreds of days actually, built a very intimate relationship slowly and steadily. He didn't take advantage of the man's opening up, the octopus's opening up. He didn't, of course, overextend boundaries or expect too much. He took it slowly and steadily. Just like we do with CBT, if you're in a deep place, you tend to have micro habits that are helping you out of the pit that you fell into. It's all about being slow and steady with that reassurance and start to encourage that emotional opening up. We can't expect upon our partner to open up about the most traumatic stories of their life and the most vulnerable and their biggest vulnerability straight away. We just have to eke it out of them, and hopefully over time they become more comfortable over date nights, over sitting down watching TV and over dinner, that things start to open up. But it's all down to you and your role in the empowered space to see how you can create that safety for him. A beautiful question to wrap it all up is ask him, who are you if you're not fill in the blank? So add the mask in there. Who are you if you're not the athlete? Who are you if you're not the leader? Again, some of these can be very deeply embedded and sensitive subjects. If you tell him he's an alpha, that could trigger a lot of things. So just look at it and all the traits I've said and try and peel in a good sentence there. This will hopefully show him answers to how he may be performing, how he may be faking it, and finding out that authentic self that's so scared to come out. I want you to believe, you watching this as a woman or somebody in a relationship or as a guy, do not self-abandon. Understand what you can tolerate and what you can't. Again, it's down to the person and their responsibility to do the deep healing, not yours. You're not here to rescue him or help him find his self-actualization. Of course, live through him and neglect your own self-discovery is about how you go deep within yourself so that then you can reflect that back to your partner. That's authentic. Do not lose your authenticity trying to find somebody else's authenticity. And of course, as an empath, we can definitely become a product of our environments. So if this romantic relationship is so shut off, so fake, so performative that it's really losing your authentic self, it's time to rethink it. And to leave you from my heart to yours with a final message, your potency isn't for everyone, and it isn't supposed to be. If you want to do even more deeper work for yourself, I have included in the description below my free shadow work journal and my free masterclass to heal your relationship with men, which goes a little deeper into the male psyche and your relationship with him. And before you go, please like, subscribe, and comment below your thoughts. I want to hear them. If you've come across these masks in your relationship and what challenges you faced, so I can cover it in a later video. Much love, and from my heart to yours, have a beautiful day.